Alex, I think we're ready. All right, everyone. It looks like it is 9 o'clock, so I think we're free to get after it if our chair is. Mr. Collins, if you want to call it to order, I'll do the roll.
Call the engineering committee meeting to order.
All right. It is 9 o'clock. It's February 6th, 2025. The engineering committee meeting it'll be a continuous meeting that'll flow into the full board meeting. So we won't adjourn, but we'll just move through the items, and then if we get to 10 o'clock, then we'll have to just take a break, and we can pick it back up if we need to at committee reports. But for the roll then, Jason Carter.
Here.
Alton Heathcote.
I'm here.
Eddie Jett.
Here.
Dr. Ash.
Here.
And James Collins.
Here.
All right, thanks, sir. It's your meeting, so if you want to introduce the topics, and we'll just flow through them as you please.
All right, so the first topic we've got is a reference manual update. We had discussed at our last meeting the possibility of including a policy statement regarding the use of publicly available mapping for the basis of design. And Jason Carter had proposed a statement. Jason, you want to talk about that, or I've got it here if you want me to read it for you.
Yeah, it's
Page
Glenn
39.
took it and he's already drafted it as item 17 of the appendix of the reference manual.
Yeah.
It's in our packets.
All of your, by the way, and just for sake of recall, all of your engineer committee documents will have the, we'll say engineer at the front of it, and then right below that, towards the bottom of all of your documents, you should see reference manual. And we're looking at page 39, highlighted at the bottom was what was included. And thank you, Jason, for putting that together for us, too.
Yeah, so I'll say this was intended to be a draft, so, that's why we're talking about it now. Any input,
Yeah,
by all
Glenn,
means.
I think at least on mine, it's page 36.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, 36,
36.
correct, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody have any thoughts after you had a chance to read it? Any discussion?
I've got a quick question. Do we have information or evidence or case histories where people have used that data incorrect? Like, I know the Tennessee LIDAR is really very good.
Right.
But we've encountered this in our office. If you work in MicroStation, you can read the LIDAR really well. If you work in AutoCAD, AutoCAD has trouble getting past the tree line. So we know better than to use it without field verifying it. But are there cases or incidences where there's been an issue associated with this?
I don't know if there have been any complaints filed with the board, but I know I've heard stories from contractors or other engineers that, hey, we've heard stories about, we've gotten a set of drawings, that was the basis, the contractor went to build it, and there's elevations that are off 2 feet or whatever.
We had that in Memphis too.
Right.
Yeah.
We've seen that as well.
Here. One comment about the board recommends. Is there a stronger word that's less likely to be challenged, like endorses or requires? Recommends kind of leaves you with the option of,
Yeah.
I don't need to do this, but I know you recommend it, but I stand behind it, instead of a little bit stronger.
If we
word.
require it, we'd have to do it as a law, wouldn't we?
Or use maybe the word endorse, like we don't recognize.
Threatens.
Yeah, threatens. There we go. I don't know, just some thoughts out loud.
is a requirement, but it's gonna be a lot of impact.
Right.
Cost impact.
Right.
Glenn and our esteemed attorneys, if we did use a word like require, wouldn't we have to make that a law, a rule?
Yes.
That's what we were just talking about.
Yeah. It's just that, a reference manual. It's like a job aid guide, something to that effect, but it's not binding like a statute, rule, or even, and that's why we got to be really careful with policy too. We always try to import that into rule as well. And so this is just something that, a historical document that's been maintained by the board for quite a few years. And so we don't want to use strong language that would give the sense that it's got the weight of rule or law.
These public records come with disclaimers, I'm sure.
Suggest.
So we won't have to add disclaimer to the language ourselves.
Board strongly recommends.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Is there a way to do a search to determine whether or not we've ever had a case that we've reviewed before that was predicated on somebody missing the elevations because they used mapping data instead of survey data?
Nothing in recent memory. Of course, you guys, know as well as I, looking at the reports since at least 2022, May, I don't recall anything that jumps out at me. Obviously, though, we're just trying to keep in step with the increase more than anything else.
Maybe on the surveyor side.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. It's been a discussion over there. Yeah, it has been.
I would think so. I would think it'd be more likely to occur on their side than on our
It does,
side.
yeah.
Maybe we could check with them and find out if there are cases that's where that's come up and has become an issue, and what their recommendation would be.
Their
I know they'd
problem-
want to recommend everything be surveyed.
Yeah, their issue with that publicly available mapping data is unlicensed activity. Someone thinking that because they have that data that they can conduct land surveying, that's their primary issue over there.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other than that, their surveyors understand the limitations of mapping data, so they get about as many as you guys probably get in that regard. But the inquiries come up, when they're working in the field or whatever, because everyone's trying to keep step with the developments, and we want to use technology where we have it, but to the extent that we can and stay with and still draw within the bounds.
Something like that is being discussed in the land surveyor board.
Yeah, more in unlicensed activity. That's where they have the problems, is someone thinking that publicly available data entitles them to start marking boundaries and then, sharing that information with others. And that's where they get themselves jammed up, folks that are basically conducting land surveying, and in essence, and then using that data in that regard.
I would like to get feedback from the surveyors to see if they have a recommendation for, and I agree with Eddie, that ought to be strengthened. I mean, we ought to, that's probably something we need to draw people's attention to, because apparently every one of us has seen incidences where the data that you get off of some certain mapping services is not nearly as accurate as other. Like Tennessee LiDAR is usually really close, but it may not be exact.
Right.
The old trust all men but cut the cards.
Yeah.
Okay, you can trust some of the LiDAR data, but you better feel verified.
And that works with AI too, not to open up that can of worms, but, same thing. We it's a tool, but it doesn't, you just don't turn it loose. But yeah, we can go back and then, there's some language like strongly recommend, urge, some things that we were sort of sidebar discussing.
Or maybe if recognized to, the board recognizes that field data be used. We're just trying to give
Yeah.
like if we had an instance where we had to base a decision or evaluate something, we could go back and say, we've already talked about this,
Yeah.
and we recognize that field survey data should be used as a basis
Yeah.
for design.
Should, something to that effect. But yeah, so what we can do then, since we've got some other pieces that we want to get to, we'll just, we'll put a pin in this one. You guys can wordsmith that a little bit on some of that language, and then I'll go back to land surveyors, because they've got their meeting on the 20th of this month, and so I can get some feedback from them. And then we'll just do it again in, let's see, what, April?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
Sound good?
Yep.
thank you.
Yeah.
That's a good point too, Jason.
Okay. All right, so we'll move on to the next item, which is design deliverables. So the issue here is how do we address the issue of 3D models becoming the deliverable? And I know that the Federal Highway Administration and some other people have put out some papers on those. I know Jason provided us some information on those.
Right.
They didn't appear to me to help provide any direction or guidance on the issue that we would be concerned about. I know you've dug into this a lot more. You've been part of a seminar. If you want to kind of talk about that a little bit.
So the FHWA has released they call it a roadmap, and it is, as James said, probably intentionally vague, but it does state a goal of 2031 for implementation by the various state DOTs to achieve this goal, which is the 3D model being the deliverable. And so, we've kind of talked about it. ACEC, we might ask Casey if she shows up, but I know ACEC has released a position paper on the subject and basically saying we fully support the use of that. I think probably one thing that we ought to do is see where TDOT is on the issue, because I honestly don't know that.
Any discussion on this item?
Can y'all clarify the question?
Yeah, so
Elvis is in the building.
yes, so I think the crux of the crux of the issue here is that there is a strong push to start using 3D models as the deliverables on construction plans. And so the question for us is, how do we make sure that those are properly prepared, sealed, ownership taken of those documents by a registered professional? And that in all the documentation that I've seen about it, that's one issue that is not covered in any of the recommendations from Federal Highway or ACEC or anybody else. They talk about all the implementation processes, but nobody talks about how do you seal those plans? How do you say these plans were prepared by me? Now, what TDOT has been doing for several years now, they've been using PDFs in their deliverables, and there's a way that you can sign and seal that PDF so that it cannot be altered by anybody else but you. But we don't have that necessarily that same protection now in some of the 3D models that are out there.
No, I'm not aware of any on commercial buildings.
Need you there on the mic, yeah.
You turned it back off.
I'm not aware of any on the commercial building side, control-wise, for 3D models. So I guess until that technology emerges, it's going to be sealed drawings, whether they're in the form of a digital format or a physical format.
Well, for TDOT, we're using ORD now, and it's a 3D model, but at the end of the day, you have to produce PDFs and you have to sign them and seal them. I don't see why this approach can be adopted everywhere.
Yeah, so I think from my reading of the FHWA model, guidelines, what they're saying is that you wouldn't be delivering a PDF. You would be delivering the actual model to the contractor, and the contractor would then use that model for construction. He would, so he doesn't have to go pull information off of the PDF. He just has that model, and he can plug that information into his grading machines, and they go to town and go start working. Now, the contractor will call the engineer and say, hey, can you send me your 3D model out of AutoCAD so I can use that for my grading purposes? Or can you send me,
And we get that too, but we tend to, there's the forms and the language they have to sign that
Right.
says, hey, this is a digital format, we don't have control over it, it can change through the transmission of the file from one place to the other, and we're not responsible for that. So you're gonna have to take that and verify it with the sealed drawings that you have.
right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I know where you're going, it's,
And that process is kind of sort of being pushed aside by the HWA and saying, you just hand the model over to the contractor and that's the plans, go build it.
Is there a way to lock the 3D model? I don't think so. I mean, it's contractor can take it and make
Yeah.
changes.
yep.
So,
And did they do as-built? Weren't they performing as-built off those? So there's that
Mhm.
mechanism too.
Yes, at the end of the day, I don't know that there's action necessarily that we can take, just more of, we need to be aware of and track the progress of this to see how it impacts us.
Or at least make Casey aware of the specific concerns so that she can communicate it to whoever the right people are. Yeah.
And TDOT and
Yeah.
others, yeah. I
Yes.
mean, maybe us as individuals, but as the board can help to make sure that those agencies are aware that this is an issue that needs to be considered as they move into this process, and how we're gonna do that.
I almost think that we should be looking for the emergence of, similar to when you take a Word document and you make a PDF, from a 3D modeling perspective that makes a 3DF or a PDF model that can be looked at but not altered. But that technology, to my knowledge, has not emerged yet.
I think you invented it with the 3DF.
Yeah.
Right.
There you go.
even
Need
the
to write that
PDF now, even if you lock the PDF.
Let me get you on the mic there, Dr. Ash, because, yeah.
Even the PDFs that we're talking about now, and we sign and seal it and lock it, there are ways to unlock it. If somebody wants to do that.
Okay, so maybe we keep this as another item under advisement. We'll continue to maintain awareness of it and try to find just keep it on our minds and on our agenda.
Once one of the state agencies start looking into it seriously, that's probably the time for us to interact.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the association's a good place to track that because they're dealing with vendors and firms and, cross jurisdictions through their chapters. So that's a great place to Casey, like you mentioned, to keep up with some of that. And, obviously TDOT is going to make adjustments as well as necessary. So guidance from them, that's all helpful. But so we can keep that on the back burner like you discussed. And it was, I think worth having that discussion and introducing the topic because I imagine we'll be dealing with it in the future. So unless there's anything else, Chair, I think we're ready for the.
Okay. Yeah, so the next item on the list is titled kind of broadly progressive experience. And the origin of this was that Jason and I were both contacted by some people from the South Carolina NCES board, and they're dealing with the issue of how do you define progressive experience for somebody who works in construction. And they had identified some requirements that the Alabama board had put together, which Glenn sent out to everybody, that kind of defines these things we consider to be, engineering experience. And so South Carolina was just trying to find out what other states were doing and had asked the question. And as Jason and I were talking about, we thought, well, maybe this would be something good for our committee to, kind of look at what we're doing right now and see is there something that we may want to do different? Are we good with what we've got? Or, do we want to consider doing something different like what Alabama has done? And Glenn sent out the current law or the current rules to everybody, the law to everybody, I guess it's the rules. And it talks about the, you know, the elements, you know, the practical application of theory, and gives a list of 7 things there that apply, the management of engineering rules, another 6 items there that we look at, and the communication skills, a couple items there to look at. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out, see if anybody had any thoughts or comments. Do we feel comfortable with what we're doing now and the way that we're determining, you know, if people have construction experience, that they're it's appropriate and matches these items, or do we need something that's more specific related to the construction field?
And keep in mind too that you're still reviewing these applications, you know, so it's not like, you know, you put out some guidance and then, you know, like that's it, that they're going to bypass you and that's expediting their applications. Any guidance that you would put out is really just that, just guidance to external increase. So sometimes, but there's also the disadvantage that you can run into where you think you're closing loopholes and sort of nailing it down, and then what you're doing is sort of obligating yourself and opening them up. You know what I mean? That happens, sort of adverse consequences, unexpected. That happens sometimes. So you know, the question before you is, do we need to provide more clarification for those working in construction, or is the Rule 120.01.10.2 sufficient? And, you know, typically, anytime you're dealing with something that can sometimes be somewhat ambiguous, it's better, philosophically, the approach seems to be better to just take it by a case-by-case basis. And so, you know, my recommendation is, if you feel like progressive experience, or our progressive experience as defined in our rules, and as you can see, it's quite a few pages there. If you feel like that is sufficient, or do you think you could, with your expert review and those rules in front of you, make that determination, I would advise against producing anything in addition to that, because that's sort of a moving target.
I think typically in the past, when anything like that has come to question, it's the engineering committee has decided whether or not they think it actually satisfies the conditions of progressive experience. And again, if they can't demonstrate that they've got 4 years under the direct supervision of a licensed professional performing work specific to what an engineer would normally do, we traditionally have not granted that. And we always give them instruction or provide instruction on how to achieve that.
And that's a great point too. The initial touch is your evaluation or application review as you receive them. But then you do have the committee. When we run into difficult discussions about that, then all 6 come together and can make that determination. So if that's worked for you in the past, then my recommendation would just keep doing that. And we don't get so many of those. As you notice, you don't have an application review today, and I don't believe we had one that's been a while. I mean, we've had a couple in the last few months, but it's not so overwhelming that we can't manage it based on the system we've got currently in place. But I appreciate the conversation. I think it's worth having, because these inquiries keep coming up, to your point. They come up through our associations and the jurisdictions that we share the lines with, an inquiry certainly too. So it helps us when we have folks reach out to us, so we're all on the same page to know how to respond to them.
Yeah, and just, to clarify, I don't think we've got an issue with the way we're doing it now, but I just thought it was, we're hearing this from several other states, and thought it'd be good just throw it out on the table and see what our folks thought. So.
No, great idea. That's what this forum's for. So yeah,
Yep.
very
Yep.
appropriate.
Yep. Okay.
Our documents right now does not say anything about.
No. Yeah, construction can be defined very loosely depending on what jurisdiction and what, contracting boards in those jurisdictions. So, that's why, because construction means a lot of different things to people. I mean, there's been times that I've told my wife I'm going to go out and, you know, I'm going to conduct construction, but there, anybody that was witnessing that would realize that is not construction, you know? So,
By construction, I mean swinging a hammer and hitting your thumb.
Yeah.
If you
some
read 120.01.10, namely number 2, you know, it does talk about testing, which to me, that kind of implies some of the things on this list from the Alabama board. Number 4 talks about implementation, which to me kind of implies similar things. So it's not as explicit as this document from Alabama, but I think it's
covers it.
implied in there.
I think so too, and, you know, there's some of the larger construction companies will employ project managers that are PEs. And what's the implication of that? They're PEs, and then they hire engineering interns, which they in turn vouch for them to take the PE exam. So it's kind of like, an engineer adjusts, I think it kind of takes care of itself and
Yeah.
goes through a lot of the criteria, even though they may not be in design, they're in portions that are so relative to it.
I think now, doesn't UT offer construction engineering
Yeah.
as a,
Memphis too.
Yeah.
And you can take the PE in construction.
yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Chair, were you ready for the next one, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the next issue, I think we've talked about this or around this a couple of times before, but Dr. Ash brought this up again for us to discuss. And the question here is, what sort of appellation can a person use that has graduated from an ABET accredited engineering college with a 4-year degree, but has not passed their FE? So they can't be called an engineering intern because that, according to our law, says they have to have their FE. And so what sort of appellation can they use? And is it something that we want to say, this is what your title would be? Or, I mean, you know, if a company has somebody that's in that situation and they give them another name that doesn't have engineer or engineering in it, that's okay. But if they want to give them some sort of title that has that in it, according to the way I read the law right now, they can't do that. Now, Dr. Ash, you want to talk about that a little bit more?
It's, you know, a lot of people are not aware that they cannot call themselves engineer without getting in trouble in Tennessee. So, I think if we can help avoid them getting in trouble because of that, you know, I don't see why not. But the key here is what the term and what the name should be, you know. As engineering associates work, engineering professional, you know, if we say the word engineering in the title, does that by itself imply something that they don't have?
Yeah, and
It's,
one thing that we were running into, and there was context, and then, but historically, well, let's start with the context. One of the contexts is there as well, and you're right. I mean, if they use engineering, there's rules that prohibit use of that if you're holding yourself out and, you know, suggesting and the weight. And that's one of the reasons why we went by the totality of circumstances, to use a legal sort of expression, and took it case by case basis on each of these, is because the industry themselves is struggling with this. That's why NCWS is tackling it with by deciding where what they should do. And we had one meeting in December of 23, and at that time we weren't really able to adjust all of the different variances or uses of it in a clear, concrete way. So then we kicked it to the February 24th meeting, and then we talked about maybe adopting associate, kind of like Architect did in their rules, and then sort of step back from that with the intent that we can hopefully urge NCWS to move the entire industry along, because the issue isn't just even our jurisdiction. It's the entire country is using that word engineer in inappropriate ways. And so until the public themselves can we got to turn the whole ship around. It's not like a little tugboat, it's turning this whole aircraft carrier around. And that's going to require an effort by the industry themselves, and then we can follow suit. And we still, our rules and our statute is sufficient enough that on a case-by-case basis, we can identify those folks that are intentionally misleading the public, trying to hold themselves out as a professional engineer. So we still have the teeth to do what we want, but we've avoided further clarifying for the same reason that we didn't do with sort of the construction experience as well. We didn't want to sort of put ourselves in a corner and limit our ability, knowing that we don't even have the imagination for all the places it could be used. One, that a lot of the companies they're not going to quit using engineer when they on their job postings, and that's a lot of these companies aren't just in Tennessee. They're outside of us, and they're going to hire those postings in Tennessee or other states. And so we really need an industry standard. The other one too is context-wise, is you've got other industries that aren't even associated that use engineer. I mean, back in the day when people had turntables, they were a music engineer or audio-visual engineer. I would never put that person to build a bridge. I wouldn't assume that means that they play music while they're building their bridge. But I know that those, we have to take the context. We're having to have to look at it, each of those case-by-case basis. So that's why we walked that one back and just decided then, it's not ideal. It's sort of uncomfortable. It's not really the best place to be, but we didn't really have a solution until the industry is going to have to lead it. And then we from there can sort it out in our rules. But our rules and our statute does allow us to go after and have all the teeth we need to penalize anybody that's holding themselves out as an engineer in the professional sense, as an occupation. And so, again, we might have to do our engineering committees. We've had some where, we've had to sort of circle the wagon and figure out and sort it out in board meetings with those complaints. But typically, we know who those folks are by complaint.
I've got questions from a couple of firms that say, what should we call these people? And I didn't have an answer.
Yeah.
Anything but an engineer.
In that
But
case-
here's one issue I may have with that. We have a law that allows somebody with 12 years of demonstrated progressive experience after they've graduated from a 4-year accredited university to sit and take the PE without passing the FE, which may diminish the FE a little bit, but still, we give them that opportunity. So, I mean, if they've graduated for the 4-year university and they've got progressive experience and they struggle passing the FE, but they can pass the PE, we're going to give them a license. So how do we regulate that? I mean, it seems like a little bit of a dichotomy.
I'm looking also,
Dr. Ash, we just need you on the mic, yeah.
I'm looking also at it from point of encouraging people to go to engineering industry. I mean, if you tell somebody you're gonna go to the engineering school, you're gonna spend 4 years and get an engineering degree, but you cannot call yourself an engineer, that might be discouraging people from taking this route. Yeah. And that's exactly the opposite of what we need these days.
And if someone reaches out to you, I would point them to our rules and statute, and as well. That's helpful. And I, when I just don't say, yeah, look at our rules and statute, I give them the PDF and then highlight it and say, hey, look, this might be helpful for you. And that usually takes care of a lot of the problems, because then they can make those decisions themselves in concert with their attorney. You're not wading into those waters, sort of, giving them a pass, and then you find out you got a complaint later that you're going to have to litigate. You don't typically do that, where the circumstances are entirely different than what was presented to you. Sometimes, I mean, not that anyone would bait and switch us, but just, until we have all the information, we don't give determinations. We just say, hey, look, the rules that speak on appellations are X, and you might want to look at that because obviously, if they're a local firm and they want to do the right thing, they're gonna take that to heart, and they're gonna make. These are really smart people. You guys are super smart, and the people you work with are super smart. They'll be able to, in concert with their attorney, sidestep that. It's clear enough in our statute and rules that they'll know if they're in violation of that. We can't sort of give them any assurances on the front end that, well, I guess everybody's doing it, so you can too. We can't do that. But You just point them to the rules and the laws and say, hey, look, NCAAS is hammering it out. And for all of us in this room, and really every jurisdiction that's dealing with this and wrestling with this, I hope sooner than later.
One other quick attachment to that, if we create an alternate language, like engineering associate, like you were talking about, wouldn't that also have to become a law or a rule?
It would, yes. It would have to be a
So-
rule, yeah.
I mean, you were talking about another 2 or 3 year exercise just to do that, to accommodate something.
And one of the things we talked about, and if you go back and look at that tape, December 23rd and February 24th, during that discussion in committee, one of the things that we talked about was just that. We made that connection. This is going to be a rule or statute anyway. So if we're going to have to do that, don't we want to get it right? I mean, we don't want to, it's better to be right than first. You know what I mean? And so if the industry turns around and says professional engineer, and now we're, rewriting our rules and laws to adjust to that, because that's the moniker everybody's using, and we've already stepped in it, and so that's why we just said, hey, it's not best, but we just point folks to the rules, the laws, and then where we have some folks that are misrepresenting themselves through complaint, would litigate that with our rules and statute. It gives us the full force to do what we need to do.
Has that been discussed in the 2024 meeting? Because I know in 2023, there was a committee that looks at that, and their recommendation was to switch to professional engineer. What we call engineer, it becomes a professional engineer, but I don't know if that has been discussed further in 2024.
You've got a couple NCAAS muckety mucks right here, maybe they can kind of move that along for you.
I mean, I think I have to go back and look at this to make sure, but I think the model law right now uses the term professional engineer and not just engineer. I'm pretty sure that's right. Yeah, I mean, the other side of this is, last Friday, I was at a meeting, and there were 3 young, recent graduates, I would say recent, within the last year, of an engineering school with a 4-year degree. None of those kids had even taken the FE yet.
Yeah.
They all had jobs working for a municipality where they had a title of engineer in their jobs. And I asked them if they had passed the FE, and they all said, no, I haven't taken it yet. And I said, well, I know the municipality you're working for, and then isn't that a requirement of your employment? And they said, yeah, it says you have to pass the FE within 6 months, but nobody's enforcing it, so we're not worried about it. And that's the kind of attitude that I think that we've got to try to avoid. I have sympathy for those people who have tried to pass it and can't, but we don't want to give some sort of appellation out there, in my opinion, to these people that has the word engineer in it just because they have a degree, but they haven't even made an effort to pass the FE. At this point. So I think there's a fine line we have to watch and go along there, and not, we want to encourage people to get engineering, but we don't want them to start doing things and calling themselves engineers, thinking that they're covered by the law by using that terminology, and then not have gone through the process.
And it could be as easy as something like the master's programs do. They'll have their name and it'll BSCE, If you use the word engineer, and if you have to signify, and I don't know, it could be something practical like that, but.
Maybe that's another one of these things where we could engage ACEC to help educate. That may not be the right word, but.
Yeah. And honestly, I'm getting more concerned about universities and the professors at the universities and the population of those professors that are not PEs and are not encouraging their students to become PEs. That's one of my big concerns right now. Okay.
Great, those are good points.
Any other items to come before the committee?
So, one to think about, and this goes back to.
Oh, Eddie, yeah.
This goes back to the reference manual update. We could probably spend hours talking about it now, but I just want to bring up, there is a loophole in the requirement, if you can look on page, if I can find it. actually page 1. So the requirements of building design. It says, in general, all structures must have plans prepared by design professionals registered by the board. Occupancy classifications are defined by the codes currently adopted by the Tennessee State Fire Marshal's Office. The only exceptions to this requirement are structures classified as business, factory, hazardous, mercantile, and residential and storage occupancies. And a subsection under that says less than 3 stories, less than 5,000 square feet. And a lot of people look at that as that covers all, but the way I read it, structures classified as business, factory, hazardous, mercantile, residential, the definition of residential, if you read down below, the classifications we're using, examples include multiple dwellings, which are more than 2 family dwellings. So if you go back up to the list, the exceptions are structures classified as business, factory, industrial, hazardous, mercantile, residential. The next bullet point says 1 and 2 family dwellings and domestic outbuildings appertaining to those dwellings. 1 and 2 family dwellings do not have a square footage cap. So if we got a challenge of 1 or 2 family dwelling of 10,000 square feet and somebody placed a complaint, I don't think we would have sufficient guidance based on these guidelines and rules. I think that's acceptable. I think it's widely used, especially out in country areas and maybe even some small cities. And the other reason I think that is the interpretation is Knox County residential, 1 and 2 family dwellings code enforcement, they only require structural engineering over 5,000 square feet, and that's just their prerogative. If it were a requirement, then any of those houses over 5,000 square feet would require seals on structure, architectural, mechanical, electrical. Site design. So I think there's some room to clarify some things and make it practical.
Yeah,
but
that's international building code specific, and obviously the municipalities have, sort of their own thing, and that's state fire marshal office specific, which is sort of the bulk. And that, probably to your point, you talked about some of those rural areas. That's
Yeah.
going to be the state, sending out their inspectors for that under international building code. But I think that's the driver there. So maybe if anything, if you were worried about that, some caveat, some disclaimer or something would be fine if you wanted to tag it.
yeah, it's really, I think it's just the way this is written, the classifications. If you take out everything, it says the only exemptions to this requirement are 1 and 2 family dwellings. If you read that another way, those 2 subpoints don't cover. That pretty much says that the architectural, if you design a residence over 5,000 square feet in the state of Tennessee, you do not have to have an architectural license or a structural. That's the way I read it. And I think that's probably the way it's being interpreted.
Well, we're going to be cleaning up that last part, that addendum that we added. If you want to throw a couple at us, because we're going to have to look at it anyway in
Yeah.
April. So
Yeah.
then we can just, throw a couple of those in there and then see what we're working with. And of course, get it, cleared by legal too. That helps us. So we have sort of a work product. And, typically, depending on where we're at, where that legal review happens, because sometimes we'll get it all, nice and neat and tidy, at least in our minds. And then we change a word or two, and it's substantial enough that it needs another review, So nonetheless, but we can have that discussion if you like. Just kick it around and, kind of toy with it on the way home. And if you think of something, and put it in there, and then we'll get together a work product for our next one. Yeah, thanks.
So that will be on the April agenda for discussion.
Yeah, if we have a work product. I mean, obviously, I like seeing you guys, but, probably wouldn't just put us together unless we had something we could sort of get after, But, yeah, if we have something in front of us that we could discuss, then, yeah, we'll have a meeting and do it then. Yep.
All right, any other items to come up before the committee? If not, I just wanted to mention a couple of things right quick. For those of you who are interested in getting more involved in NCES, they've got their committee preference survey is out now. If you haven't seen that yet, it's out. You know, encourage you to take a look at that, see if there's something you want to do. And the other thing is that they are currently in the process of starting to redo the structural exam and going back and looking at all of the questions and all that kind of stuff. And so they are looking for licensed structural engineers to help them with the professional activities and knowledge study. It's a survey, but it takes about an hour to do that survey.
You mean
So-
they're not just going straight to academia and asking them?
That's right. They are specifically requesting professional licensed engineers to do this. And so they have put out a call for people to fill out that survey if you are a structural engineer. So if you know any structural engineers that you think would be interested in doing that, please encourage them to do that, because that is an opportunity for us to be able to influence the types of questions that are being asked.
When will they do that for the civil environmental exam?
So they do this type of study on all of the exams once they get to a certain age. Just like when they get to be 6 or 7 years old, then they will then do one of these evaluations again, send that information out, and then recreate a new exam that'll come out 2 or 3 years later.
Yeah.
So it'll come up. But they're doing, like this year, I think they're doing like 3 or 4 of the different areas that they're doing this in right now.
So we cannot limit on the academia from now.
Well, they can be licensed structural engineers and be in academia. And in general, that's who they reach out to put those together. So hopefully other actually practicing engineers will have an opportunity to participate in that.
Yeah, and I think that there is certainly a desire within NCES to have more practicing engineers participate in that process. It is hard to get them to do that. I think that's the challenge, is it's hard to get somebody who's in practice that's not in academia to participate in the process of developing the questions and all that kind of stuff.
And I'm assuming they still, is it called physiometry or whatever the?
Psychometrics. Psychometrics is the term they use, yeah.
Okay.
It's like saying photography.
Yeah,
that's right.
okay. And you know, you understand what that is. If people answer a question right too often or badly wrong too often, they take it off the exam. And again, you don't dare say this at an NCAAS meeting, because believe me, I've had the experience of being attacked, literally attacked after saying this. But why do we allow academia to do what they do? And it's a sense of pride, a badge of honor for them if they create a question on the exam that people fail to get. And it's a discouragement to any young engineer pursuing professional licensure because of that.
Yeah, I don't know, it's a good question.
Yeah. And so,
There
believe
are
me,
guards against it.
don't ask it
No.
at NCAAS.
There are guards against that. I was looking, we have a vendor for some of our testing, and they're, I know NCAAS, the association's CLARB does this too. I don't know what they call them, but they have that look at the questions and how well they perform. And if, for example, if you have somebody that is killing it, they're a high percentile, but then they also miss that question, but yet get a light question in that same group, and they did very well on it. Well, it's the question. You can't defend that question. At some point you got to toss and get a new one. And so there's stuff like they do to work that. And I'm pretty sure NCAAS is probably, I can't imagine if you're putting out a product that because you're going to get some pushback, and all the way up to potentially even litigation. So you're there. I would dare venture that they're going within they're within industry standard for evaluating those questions. I would be shocked if they weren't. As big as an organization as they are and as professional as they are, if they weren't using the tools at their disposal, well then, I would be shocked. So I feel like in pretty good confidence. Obviously, I don't work in there. James, you're on that committee now, and I mean, that was pretty bold. I mean, right out the gate, he went straight for the exam. He was hungry. All right, I
Yeah.
think we're good. We won't adjourn, it'll just be a continuous meeting, and then we'll come back at 10 o'clock and embarrass this guy. All right, let's see, I'm doing a quick little head count here. Looks like we may have quorum. Yeah. Chair, if you like, you can go ahead and call us to order, and then we'll go ahead and take roll.
We'll call the February meeting of the Board of Architectural and Engineering Examiners to order. We'll begin
Thank you,
with a roll
sir.
call.
Yes, sir. Melanie Doss,
Here.
Blair Parker,
Here.
Brian Tibbs, Frank Wagster,
Here.
Dr. Ash, Jason Carter,
Here.
Rick Thompson, and he may be joining us Teams in and out, but he won't be present today, but I think he's going to circle back with us when we get to the legal report and some of the later part of the agenda. Jeff Nally, Alton Heathcote,
I'm right here.
all right, Eddie Jett,
Here.
and James Collins.
Here.
Looks like we have quorum. Just want to draw attention to the fact that the notice of public comment period that's located at the end of the agenda. So once we're done with everything, right before we adjourn, we'll give an opportunity for the public, whether online or currently in the House, to make comments, anything pertaining to the agenda then. So just want to draw attention to that. Go ahead, if you are online or if you're even behind me, go ahead and sign in, and we'll give you another opportunity when we get to that point as well. The meeting notice. Notice of the February 6, 2025 meeting of the Board of Architectural and Engineering Examiners has been noticed on the website since December 18th, 2024. This month's agenda was posted on January 30th, 2025. And then for announcements, I wanted to take an opportunity to just recognize our former chairman of the Engineering Committee, former board member. You all know him well, Rob Barrick. And so I'd like to present him a plaque for his service. He's spent a lot of time hunting and fishing these days and, hanging out with his frat brothers. So, we're not going to get in his way. We're going to let him just do that. And then, but anyway, we appreciate his service. He's done a fantastic job. We covered a lot of territory during that period, as you know, with additional pathways, with a rules package, polishing out the definitions, all of that. And so he was here at a very crucial time, and we really appreciate his contribution and really just appreciate his friendship as well. So if I may, join me in.
And single-handedly streamlined a lot of our meetings.
He was our efficiency expert. He was working with Musk, up there to get all that done. So thank you, Mr. Barrick, for your contribution. And let me just read this plaque to you in the record. It says, Board member recognition presented to Robin Barrick. Our sincere appreciation for the many years of dedicated service and outstanding leadership in giving voice and vision for the past, present, and future. You have made an invaluable contribution to the Tennessee Board of Architectural and Engineering Examiners. Thank you, sir.
Thank you all. Alton, thanks for saying that I streamlined. I was about to thank you all for tolerating my impatience when we began this process. I have learned a lot about state government and all that kind of stuff, but I do want to say I really did enjoy being with you all for those 4 years that I was here. I know you're here like I was because you want to give something back to the profession that supported you all of your life, and it was good to be with you. So carry on. I'm playing golf and fishing and messing around, and I'm 72. I'm old enough to do that now without feeling embarrassed about it. And thank you.
And Chair, if you don't mind, maybe just a quick recess for about 10 minutes, just so we can get some pictures with him, and then we'll just pick up back where we left off. So if the That's 10:05, so 10:15, we'll be back in our seats. All right, we'll just take a quick recess. If y'all will take a look at that, and
Do we have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
second. All right, we got a motion from Ms. Doss, and I didn't hear where the second came from. We got one from Blair Parker then. Blair Parker? All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, hearing none then, we've adopted the agenda. The approval of the meeting minutes, December 5th, you'll have that in front of you, and Blair's already checked it for typos and edits, and it's got a clean bill of health, so on that front. But content-wise, we still game, right?
Do we have a motion to approve the December meeting minutes?
All right, looks like we got a motion from Mr. Tibbs, and then we have a second from Dr. Ash. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? All right, hearing none then, those are approved. Professional society reports. Do we have Miss Anderson? Is she online? Is Miss Anderson here? All right, no. Jackson, he's stepping in for Suzanne Herron, and we may get to see a little bit more of him. So, Jackson, if you could introduce yourself and go ahead and make your way up to the podium, and then provide that update, we'd appreciate it.
Hi, everyone.
Go ahead and turn your. Yeah.
Yep, awesome. Sorry about that. First time. Hi, everyone. Good morning.
Just introduce yourself, organization, and get.
Okay, I'm EIT, not in Tennessee just yet, but I'm in Alabama, Mississippi so far. I work 2 years of full-time experience. I work with Hazen and Sawyer. I'm part of ASCE as well to help do this organization, and I'm part of the sub-branch of with the Environmental Water Resources Institute as well. I got a little update for y'all. On January 30th through February 1st, the Nashville branch officers, the younger member group, and student chapters attended the Multi-Region Leadership Conference in Memphis, Tennessee. Approximately 375 attendees from all over the eastern portion of the United States came to the conference to gain knowledge of the society and their region, interact with students, younger members, section, branch, and institute leaders while gaining personal leadership skills and learning the importance of networking. While the branch leaders attended the workshop for the section, branch, and institute leaders, the younger members attended the Eastern Region Younger Member Council, and the students attended the workshop for student chapter leaders, and faculty and practitioner advisors attended the practitioner and faculty advisor workshop. These conferences provided an excellent mix of leadership training, information on ASE resources, activities, and programs. That's all I had. Thank you.
You guys going to go easy on him his first time out, or okay? Thanks, we appreciate you, Jackson. Thanks for representing AACE and stepping in for Miss Suzanne Herron. And again, I think Miss Suzanne and Jackson, and there might be somebody else representing that organization. That might be sliding into that, and so you may see them sort of rotating in. Ashley Cates may or may not be with us. She mentioned that she may not be able to pipe in, but we'll just check just to make sure. Ashley, are you online? No. Okay. So being told that she's not, and she's tracking all the events, and her and I touched base this morning and also a little bit last week. So if there's any updates or whatever, I'll of course share those with her along the way. Mr. Ridley.
Success. Simple pleasures when you're old. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. I'm Nathan Ridley. I'm excited about the microphone. I represent the Tennessee chapter of the American Society of Landscape Architects, and I'm probably here in a moment of weak judgment today. You notice that Ms. Anderson and Ms. Cates are not here. In the legislative arena, where I spend a lot of time, the first month of the session's typically spent getting your bills filed and introduced. And today is the last day to introduce a bill that applies from Mountain City to Memphis. So we'll go from at the beginning of the week, we might have had 400, And at the end of the day today, we'll probably have 1,300. So they've been busy. And some of them hold them, and they like to file them all at one time. But I'm sure Casey and Ashley are going through those to see how they affect our professions. You hope, so far, so good. Nothing, in years past, we've struggled with, there's some groups that talk a lot about a right turn of living, that anyone should be able to be a landscape architect or an engineer if they just think good thoughts about it. And all of the professional societies have opposed those in order to protect the health, safety, and welfare. And I don't think we'll have another one of those. Typically, that's a think tank group that parachutes in for 1 year in the legislature, and then nobody ever sees them again. And that's just me. I probably shouldn't have said that on the microphone. On the specifically to the profession, the landscape architects, they're going to have their annual meeting in April this year in Knoxville at the Standard, a historic hotel property and meeting space there, and they're excited about that. And y'all know all those conferences always have a good source of professional development hours, so we'll have a good round of those. Governor Lee will do his State of the State address on Monday, the 10th. So it's 6, and typically he will present the budget and his priorities. His priorities will be a little skinnier than they were a week and a half ago, because y'all might remember, if you've read the news, that the voucher or school choice bill, depending on how you approach it, passed in a special legislative session just by the skin of its teeth. Most bills on the House floor are passed 95 to nothing, 92 to 1, something like this. This one had 53 votes. So it's just, and you got to have 50. So probably what pushed it over the finish line was a hold harmless clause for those local school systems for that first year. So we'll have to stay tuned to see on the implementation of that. Anyway, so Governor Lee's speech on the 10th might be a little shorter than it otherwise would have been. And then state offices will be closed on the 17th. And then we have your fearless executive director on March the 6th coming to a lunch and learn for landscape architects in the Cordell Hull building, which is our staff offices for the legislature. This is a repeat performance. He was actually requested. So we're excited about that. That'll be fun. But that's all.
Is Glenn Cumming holding himself out as a landscape architect? Has he been thinking those good thoughts you were talking about?
We'll have really good vibes and good sandwiches that day, so we're excited. We've got a better room for him. We had such a big crowd last year that we had to get a bigger room. So just to show how popular your executive director is, so we're tickled about that.
They said Taylor Swift was going to be there, so.
Right.
Yeah.
But happy to respond to your questions, comments, observations. And as always, I should have started with, y'all are kind. I go to a lot of regulatory board meetings on behalf of other clients, and y'all, for the history of this board, when I first started coming, y'all have always been kind to let the professional societies speak, and we don't take that for granted. We're very grateful for that. So thank y'all, and hope your meeting goes well. Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you, Nathan, and thank you
Nathan.
for not only keeping us abreast of landscape architecture, but what's happening up on the Hill, because I think we all really appreciate that.
Yeah, very much appreciated. Thank you for that partnership. We appreciate those updates, certainly. And now that makes sense. I thought they were taking it easy on us. I hadn't seen. I know that today's the last day of filing. We'll see some more of those. So, right. That's right. Where all the work's done. All right. Let's see. Do we have Hannah Finch or Claudia Lofton? Are they online? Okay. Looks like they're not. So then I think that concludes the professional society reports. I think we're ready for the director's report. Not a lot happening there. So we've got the just the budget, which is informational only. If you want to turn there, I'll give you an opportunity to do that. All right. All right, so during our last review, we reviewed financial reporting through October. We currently have 2 more months of record. November, December is pretty much what we're going to be focused on right now. You will recall from our last meeting that we had had an uptick in expenses under technology for October to cover our share of division supplemental contract to cover a 6-month gap between the old contract, core contract, That ended in June 30th to the new core contract that started in 1/1/2025. You remember over the course of like the past year or whatever, we discussed that we were going to have some unexpected expenses that could result as a result of a new contract. So there was some uptick. That's what that was. So that's what we were waiting on. That happened in October, but some of that bled over into November. So you'll see some of that there. There was a couple of other places that jumped out at me as well. There under one was the salary and benefits under admin cost backs. If you look at, and those were in November. So if you look at November and we had admin cost backs, you have that negative amount, that 137, that reallocation, that jumped out at me. I appreciate the help, but you still want to know what it is, make sure that it's ours. And that was an irregularity. So that was one item, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then the other one was the other expenses under Edison for December. So slide over the next month, you go over to other expenses as well for December. And I saw a little bit of right there at 13,000. I just want to look at that. It's a rather large number, so just want to make sure that there's not some invoice or something tucked in there that we haven't challenged, or that's all appropriate. So those are the two items that jumped out at me. Other expenses under Edison for December, and of course, admin cost backs under November under salaries and benefits. The reallocation in November is result of a credit for due to a salary or adjustment in salary. Administration was incorrectly billed for several periods for an employee not in admin. This was corrected, and admin was credited back the amounts, which were then distributed across all the programs within the division. So that helped us out and gave us hence that reallocation there. As for November expenses, the uptick there was due to travel and postage, with the latter primarily being printing and mailing of wall certificates. So everything's appeared to be in order upon that initial review with the ledger and with accounting. So unless you see something else that jumped out at you, that's all I saw.
I've got I guess, an accounting question. Why do we put state regulatory fees under revenue and not under expenses?
I think it's just a way to capture that workaround. I've never really understood either. How they put it, it's a, how they put it, it was, it's an accounting term. I'm lost now, but it's a.
Is it an accrued entry or something? What?
Yeah, it's a workaround. Basically, Department of Administration, when they print out all of our stuff, they charge us for that. We don't do that in-house, and because it's interdepartmental and not necessarily a vendor or a true expense, then they capture it there. So that's what that is. You're looking at about $10 per license. So you do the math, and that's how many licenses got printed out of data processing. So,
Okay.
yeah, it's a reallocation to another department, and so the counting that's where they capture it. To me, I'm a simple man, but I would probably put that under expenses.
They move it out of commerce and insurance and over to somewhere else, or is it?
F&A does that, and so then they
Okay.
charge us and bill us for that. Yep.
But, okay, well,
Yeah.
still doesn't make any sense, but most accounting does not.
All right. And I didn't, just for the record, I didn't hold myself out as an accountant. I don't want to get in trouble at the Board of Accountancy on that one. So, Chief Counsel.
I don't,
just let me know.
based on that explanation, I don't think anybody thought you were an accountant.
I felt safe, but I appreciate that clarification. Thanks for pitching in out. All right. Unless there's any other questions or comments, I think we're ready for the next item, legal.
Okay. So we have 4 cases on the legal report. 3 are new and 1 just a represent. The first case is 2024-060281. And in this case, it was administratively opened. The complainant is a registered architect, and the respondent was disciplined in another state for unlawfully offering and providing engineering services without a certificate of authorization and was fined $1,000. The respondent stated that they had previously reported the out-of-state discipline. On July 1st, 2024, the respondent stated that they renewed the certificate with the other jurisdiction. The renewal form was submitted without a signature. After the authorization expired, they were informed that the signature was missing. While they were not registered, they reviewed shop drawings for a project under construction previously designed prior to the renewal. They said that they had paid the penalty in full, so the recommendation was a letter of caution.
Second.
We've got a motion from Mr. Tibbs. We've got a second from Ms. Dawes. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, hearing none, that one's passed.
And the second one is case 2024-062871. This complainant stated that on June 11th, 2024, the respondent provided a foundation investigation for their mortgage lender. They alleged that the respondent missed multiple areas. Specifically, the respondent failed to report that the shims were not properly installed, failed to inspect each pier. They also stated that the respondent reported that the foundation block was cracked when it wasn't. The respondent stated that during their inspection, they found a hairline crack in a stacked block, which was located at the bottom of the foundation pier. They also noted that in their report that a drain line was improperly installed. The respondent notified the complainant of the concerns. On September 16, 2024, the respondent was contacted by the complainant and wanted to know why the reinspection wasn't completed. The respondent tried to explain that the reinspection was supposed to be conducted by a regional inspector because the property may have not passed the Tennessee Manufacturing Housing Inspection. The respondent said that it was not found that the shims were improperly installed during their inspection or the reinspection by the independent regional inspector. After the matter was reviewed, it appeared that the respondent conducted an inspection for a newly constructed mobile home, and 6 days later, a home inspection was conducted by a different professional, and discrepancies were found in the report. The respondent provided the complainant with a letter that certified that based on their inspection, the structural support and anchoring met the pertinent requirements. However, the home inspector discovered there were multiple areas where the I-beams did not contact the piers or the pier shims. The home inspection provided numerous pictures and explanations in the report that demonstrated the numerous locations in which the steel I-beams were not in contact. It is believed that the respondent demonstrated excessive errors and/or omissions in their inspection of the foundation. And based off that, the recommendation was to assess the respondent $500 and require them to take and pass the laws and rules exam.
Just a clarification, Ariel, I think that you've got it listed as an engineering intern, but I think it's an actual licensed engineer,
Okay,
a PE.
I'll make that correction.
Thank
before it's
you.
coming.
Dr. Ash, did you make that motion?
Motion to accept the recommendation.
Okay, got a recommendation from Dr. Ash. Do we have a second?
Second.
Got a second from Frank Wagster. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, hearing none, that one's passed.
The third one is case 2024-048291. This complaint was administratively opened by the board and it's related to complaint number 2024-005021, which was presented during the October and December legal reports. It should be noted that the respondents are different but contain identical allegations. The initial complaint raised concerns that the respondent, as an architect, may not possess specialized knowledge for sealed plans that they submitted because portions of the plans provided would typically be completed by an engineer. The respondent in this matter stated that the claims were baseless and unsubstantiated. They stated that the intellectual property in question was jointly owned. They stated that the complainant seemed to be unaware of a pre-existing contract between the firms, and they advised that they had retained legal counsel and they'll be litigating this matter and requested that the board defer judgment until the proceedings were concluded. Since I was unable to determine if a violation occurred and they indicated that legal action had been taken, the recommendation was for litigation monitoring and for the respondent to provide any documents that the board deems relevant to the allegations above within 45 days of receiving notice.
And let me just check to make sure Rick's on. Rick, are you there? Is he there? He had an appointment that he had to make, so he may not be able to make it, but he was in discussions with that, and so he reviewed that and is aware of the council's recommendation and was in favor of that as well. Sorry, Brian. Brian, you were saying your motion to approve what?
Yeah, I was kind of reading it as I was making sure I didn't need to capture anything in it, but basically it's just requiring the respondent to do something more right now. And I think you said that was all. Rick also agreed to that. So, yeah, anyway, so my motion is to approve staff recommendation.
Yeah, and you know, obviously, I'm trying to capture the best I can without having Rick here, and but what the idea was, and then Ariel, correct me if I'm wrong as well, she was on the call with us, obviously, and his position was if he doesn't respond in 45 days, it would be a represent, and then we could revisit it then. But, you know, obviously litigation monitoring provides the opportunity to capture more information as that, you know, in discovery. So that's why just doing our due diligence to get as much information as we possibly can, or he can provide it, you know, but we're giving him an opportunity to do that. And the 45 days being the fact that gets us right before our next meeting. Yep.
I'll second that motion.
Got a motion from Brian Tibbs to approve the council's recommendation. Yes, sir.
I have a question before we vote.
Yeah, sure.
It seems confusing to me that where it says it should be noted the respondents are different but contain identical allegations.
Yeah, that's the number 4. That's all associated. So it's kind of it's a very busy. What we're doing is separating him out from number 4, which is a represent. You did not have that on your iPad, so that's going to be new. And of course, Ariel will do it. She's done a fantastic job sorting all that out as she fills the gap. But that one's associated. But when you see the recommendation from number 4, then you'll understand. And the recommendation for number 4 is a suspension. And so we're not there yet with this person. So we're trying to separate him out and saying, okay, we need more information from you. However, for you, you know, we have enough to come to these terms. You know, they may find themselves in the same boat as number 4, but right now, you know, we're saying we need something from you. Yep.
All right, thanks.
Yes, sir. And then we'll have further discussion, but we do have a motion from Brian Tibbs we got to approve, second from Blair Parker. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, that one passed, and now we're ready for number 4, and that's got some moving pieces to it. It's got some.
It does, yes.
Yeah.
So the last one is a represent, is number 2024035961. So I'm going to start off by saying it's like 3 separate cases that are related. 2 are related to one respondent. It was kind of combined together, and then 1 is one we just discussed. So like all related, but it's a lot kind of going on. All right. So this one was presented, and this was related to case number 2024048291. And at the public meeting on December 5th, 2024, the board voted to combine complaint number 2024-005-021, which was previously in litigation monitoring, and complaint 2024-03-5961, which has been presented a couple times to the board, to get additional information from the respondent regarding their education and qualifications. The respondent failed to provide any additional information. And just as a brief overview of the cases that are related to this respondent, in the first case ending in 5021, it was alleged that the respondent was a former employee of the complainant, and while employed with them, the respondent was involved in multiple aspects of the business and participated in the design and preparation of multiple instruments of service. After leaving the firm, the respondent took designs and was in contact with developers that were in contract with the complainant. The respondent claimed that the intellectual property then question was jointly owned by both the complainant and the respondent's firms. They claimed that they shared ownership, and it rose from a collaborative relationship between the entities. And it was originally created by the respondent for use within their venture, and access a complainant had to this information was solely due to their past association. The second one is ending in 5961. And the complainant stated that the respondent submitted sealed plans for review. The plans included mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire prevention plans that were submitted under a singular seal. The complainant raised concerns that the respondent, as an architect, may not possess the specialized knowledge for the sealed plans submitted because portions of the plans provided would typically be completed by the engineer. The project was for the remodel of a 4,000 square foot four-story building intended to be classified as an R2 building. The respondent provided an initial response saying that they were confused about the allegations. And then after multiple requests, the respondent failed to provide any information. And due to the respondent's continued failure to comply with the board's requests and seriousness of the allegations in the two complaints, the recommendation is that the respondent be revoked for 2 years.
Well, this is an interesting case, but from what I read, I would like to move that we approve the new recommendation, which is revocation of the respondent's license for a period of 2 years.
We'll have discussion, obviously, on this one. I'll at least give an opportunity for discussion. So let me just capture that motion, and if there's a second. Mr. Waxer gave us okay, so we've got a motion from Frank Waxer and a second from Brian Tibbs to approve the council's recommendation. Any further discussion? Jeff, if you can get on the mic there, yep.
So what would be his steps after this? Like, let's say if he doesn't agree, is there an appeal process that he has access to or no?
Yes, so it wouldn't automatically be revoked. After sending the consent order and they do not agree, then we would move forward with a formal hearing.
And just to confirm, we requested information multiple times. This person didn't respond, but they did respond not with the information requested, but with some other response dealing with other issues. Is that correct?
Based on what I read, they did not address anything that the board had
Right.
requested. They were requesting specifically the education that would support that they had the education and knowledge required for the seals that they had submitted. And after, I think, 3 times that we requested it, nothing has been provided. And I believe they just stopped responding completely, other than just saying that they were confused initially. So,
As a reminder, we know as fact they received our requests.
yes, they were sent the email, the first initial email, and they responded to that one. But after continuous efforts to try to get that additional information, they stopped responding. And then the other person involved, they work with them, and so they are aware of it as well. So it's very unlikely that they are unaware of what's happening.
And just one more clarification back to Frank's question before. The relationship, one more time, between this one and the last one. I mean, I think I got it, but do you mind just saying it out, maybe straight, just
So,
like, yeah.
I believe they
In
worked
one
together.
sentence.
They both worked at the complainant's firm, and I believe they left together,
Okay,
and
okay.
coworkers, I guess, is.
See, I was trying
The
to
best.
merge them. Okay, all right,
No, you're good.
thank you.
If this is the complaint that I think it is, I believe that there was also, this mentions mechanical, electrical, plumbing, but I believe there was also structural plans that were prepared by the architect as well.
Everybody got a piece of this one. I know
Yeah.
you got a piece of it, Eddie got a piece of it, you know what I mean? It's different parts of it. So it's like, yeah, it's, as you see, I mean, there was a lot happening with this particular case. And so, yeah, it's a represent. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. As I remember, the respondents, at one point, he said something to the effect of, I don't know why you're bothering with me. This is not an issue. So he was pretty cavalier about it.
Is there any further discussion?
I think if an architect reviewed this and engineers reviewed it and two other architects agree with the decision, I would call for a vote.
Yeah. Well, we have a vote, so we're on the floor, so that's helpful. A roll
I
call?
mean, call the roll.
Oh,
and
gotcha,
vote.
gotcha. Okay, tracking. Yes, sir, we can do that. And that's another reason why it's so important to have, it's so helpful to have associate engineers as well, because you guys can do a lot of the front loading on some of that. It's on that SME experience that we're going to need. So that's, we appreciate your work on that regard and your assist. Yep. Okay, so we got a motion, we've got a second I'll do a roll call vote then. Let's see, we've got Melanie Dawes. Just aye or nay?
Aye.
Yep. Sorry, I should have clarified. Yeah. Blair Parker.
Aye.
Brian Tibbs. Frank Wagster.
Aye.
Dr. Ash El Sayed. Jason Carter.
Aye.
Rick Thompson can't vote because he's not here, but let me just check to see if he's even online. Rick, are you still here? Do you have anything else you want to add? Or are you here? Okay, very well. And then Jeff Nally. All right. It's unanimous then. That motion was approved.
May I ask for some clarification? So what happens now? This person, I'm assuming it's a he, this person's license is revoked or is revoked for 2 years.
It hasn't started yet. They have the right to have the hearing. So after this meeting, then I'll send a consent order, and if they agree to have their license suspended for revoked for 2 years, then I'll go in and it'll be, as soon as we receive that consent order back. If not, then it will go to a formal hearing. Essentially, I'll file a notice of hearing and charges, and then we'll have to bring in an administrative law judge, and then we'll just set it for a date that we're already having a hearing.
Ariel,
Deal with it then.
another quick question. I mean, this individual has repeatedly ignored everything that this board has sent them.
Yes.
What if this person continues to do that?
Then we will still have the hearing, and it'll essentially just be a default hearing where they just don't show up, but the case will still be having to put on in front of the judge, and then you guys will vote on it, and it'll go into effect at that point.
And then at that point, if he continues to practice, what are the ramifications? What are the penalties? How do we assess anything?
It would likely be unlicensed activity. Like anytime, if there's like a complaint that came in, unfortunately, we probably wouldn't know until like a complaint showed up, but if you had any issues after it was revoked, then it'd be unlicensed activity. And the maximum with that is $1,000 per incident.
And this is civil, right? Is this civil?
It's administrative law, so it's civil.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like civil adjacent. It's like a own little court, but it's closer to civil than anything else, yes.
Yeah, so we don't have like a reg board SWAT team, serving a criminal warrant or anything like that, but yeah.
And I'm just curious, I mean, if this person fails to show up and he continues to ignore everything and continues to practice architecture and ignores the fines and penalties and whatever else we assess, what recourse do we have?
So if they don't pay anything, so we do ask them to pay like legal costs and court costs and anything related to the hearing. So if they don't do that, then we can send it to, we can report to essentially the credit. And so they'll have that against them. They'll owe it.
And we have a collections agency as well, so it gets turned over to state collections. And so then, at that point, and then if they get a judgment, if it keeps going, because you're like, then what? Then what? If it keeps going, then garnishment, they're subject to that potentially. Obviously, they have due process in every one of those steps, but yeah, it would go to collections. And then and if if the board, you as a jury and the judge administering all of that was to come to a decision as the jury, in that formal hearing, that to revoke that license, the state website would also reflect, and all of it's unlicensed activity after that.
Just a little down a different path, thinking ahead. So assuming that this individual shows up, maybe there's a hearing, and then or her license is revoked for 2 years, how, are they just immediately reinstated, or do they have to go through an approval process?
I believe to go back through the process as if like any other resident who was revoked or unlicensed and had to get it back.
We had a case like that fairly recently on the engineering side. I don't know if y'all remember it or not, but we had an individual whose license had been revoked in Alabama and therefore in Tennessee. And once he was eligible, he petitioned us to reinstate him, which we did. We've had that before and a couple of other times too.
The bottom line of this is painful for all of us with this situation. You know, it's just so uncomfortable.
So I believe this complaint, or at least one of the complaints anyway, originally came from a building code enforcement's office to us. Will they be notified of the results of this decision?
Yes, complainants are notified.
Listen, I want the two of y'all to know we don't take this for granted. We are so grateful for the guidance and direction that you give us and not letting us screw up, which we're prone to do. We don't understand that. But this is probably the worst thing that I do as a member of this board, reviewing complaints. I don't think any of us enjoy this. But I'm grateful to the staff for helping give us guidance and direction of what we can do and what we should do as we go through this. So particularly one that's this challenging and this difficult. I mean, obviously, it's fully vetted, the way you've distributed it out to different individuals, give them an opportunity to look at it and weigh in. It indicates to me, too, that the staff takes this very seriously and understands the nature of a complaint like this. And before we're asked to reach a decision or a conclusion about something, you're giving us all of the facts and all of the information and answering all the questions. So thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Hearing none, then, did legal have anything else as a part of their portion of the agenda?
I do not, no.
All right, then, I also echo that. Thank y'all. Appreciate your work. Committee report. Yes, sir.
So the engineer committee met this morning, discussed 4 items. The first item was an update to the reference manual to provide some recommendations regarding the use of publicly available mapping data in the completion of plans. So we're reviewing a potential recommendation that we would then come back to the board later to add to the rules about that, looking to revise that language. We had a discussion about design deliverables, particularly related to BIM and 3D modeling, and how we continue to ensure that the professionals provide some sort of certification, seal, whatever, on those documents as they move forward. There's a pretty strong movement right now, particularly in the transportation side of the world, to have those models be delivered as the final product to the contractor. And we just need to make sure there's some way in there that the engineer has that responsibility for those, and that's denoted somehow. So that's something we're continuing to look at and tracking through other organizations as they're dealing with
James,
that.
quick question. I'll ask the architects. I know you've had the BIM modeling for a very long time. When you're asked to deliver plans, are you doing 2D, it's plan sheets? Or are you actually providing models to the contractors to build from?
Are you saying like when we're not drawings? You're not talking physical drawings. You're saying like when we're to another. Yeah, typically nowadays everybody's doing BIM models or Revit model. There's this. Our firm has a lot of things you have to sign off on for protection. So does that answer that question? No.
Yes.
Okay.
I can kind of answer that. I resisted that pretty strong when that first came to pass, and it's the Revit model that the contractor wants. And what they bid on is a 2D set of drawings. But they're, take the Revit model and then try to use it as a shop drawing. And, you know, every time there's a conduit hits a duct in the Revit model, they go, hey, we need more money.
It's a change order waiting to happen,
But
isn't
the
it?
2D drawing, you're supposed to have taken that and reviewed it and looked at those things. So, to me, and again, I've been retired for a couple of years, but it was a constant fight for them looking for, you know, any kind of conflict like that in the Revit model. And I don't know if you're aware of Navisworks, but you take Navisworks and it makes it 3D. I mean, every conduit, everything in the whole building's there. And you'll see a, you know, floor drain in a bathroom and it's close to a duct and you can't get it. You know, there's all kinds of things that previously with a 2D drawing, the contractor knows how to build a building. And so he studies this and he sees these things. But now it's like, no, I've got your model. And so you didn't coordinate that floor drain with the duct.
I guess what it's worked for, and it's probably the delivery method, I mean, not to go too detailed with it, but in the cases that he brings up, I could have seen that too, so maybe I jumped ahead. But when we're doing it more, it's actually works out to be a better tool for both everyone, so that they can, you know, hey, we see that, you know, not to get bore you with details, but oh, we see you have their ductwork and it's not enough space in this, you know, interstitial space above the ceiling. We need to, you know, and what they're doing is they're putting in their actual duct sizes that don't fit inside of the space. So, yeah, he is definitely correct when different delivery methods, I think. But anyway, I've appreciated it most of the time, just because we can kind of work out things together as opposed to, you know, oh, you guys didn't coordinate this, all right, let's just figure it out together.
So
Well,
when an architect issues a set of plans to a contractor for a building, are you issuing an actual set of plans?
Yes.
Not a model?
Yeah, because we're jumping ahead probably, but yeah, but when we stamp, you know, we're stamping a 2D set of drawings, we're not stamping a Revit model.
Yeah.
Which is important too, kind of.
You can.
Which is, sorry, go ahead. I think I've messed it up. There we go. Which is important to understand too, because that's what's actually part of the, you know, of the documents. You know, what's the what they actually get to Frank's point. That's what's actually part of the contract document. So that's what I was looking for, not the Revit model. So anyway.
I guess
Yeah.
to probably what you're asking more is there a push from the industry, from AIA or whatever, to go to a paperless delivery method instead of what you're doing now?
Like give them your model to bid off of
Right.
instead of a set of plans?
I'm not aware that the AIA has anything like that.
Yeah, I haven't. No one's asked to. No one's asked to stamp a Revit model yet.
Well, that's why we're asking, because there
Yeah.
is.
No, it's a good question,
On
but
our
no.
side, there is a push from
Well,
the
it has to
industry
be some
go
way
that
to freeze exactly what we're putting as
Right.
far as something to actually be part of the contract document. So you have to freeze it at some point.
Right.
So at this point, no.
Now, it is a good tool for the contractor for scheduling and
Yeah.
a lot of different, you know, ordering materials to where they're not all getting them at one time and that type of thing. But, you know, to use it against the designer is not the intent of what's going on there. And I can see an engineer, I mean, you know, we're architects, but y'all have got all the pipes and ducts and steel beams and everything. And so, as architects, we're depending on, it's a collaboration. And we're depending on our MPE and structural, to get their part integrated in there too. And it's, when you got, 6 months to do a project, it should take you 3 years to do.
And not to keep
We're
going
not
on.
making shop drawings.
Yeah, and honestly, I've found now that a lot of contractors have it already. They have people that are building their own model based off of the information they have. So they're the more sophisticated ones.
James, so that's design deliverables, and you were still working through our list. What else did you have there on during your committee?
Yeah, so the last two items were a discussion about progressive experience, particularly related to people with that are in the construction field that are not necessarily doing standard design work, and the experience that they should have in order to become an engineer. And we concluded, I think, that our current rules are sufficient, and we'll continue using those, but with something we're just going to monitor. If at some point in time we need to add more clarification, we may do that. And then finally, we talked about appellations, particularly related to someone who has obtained a 4-year degree from ABET accredited college in engineering, but has not passed their FE. What title is appropriate for them to use? Because if they have passed their FE, they are called an engineer intern, but there's nothing for that person who hasn't passed the FE. And we don't have a good solution to that yet. We're going to look and see what NCEES is doing, and if there's someone else who's plowed the ground on that, we will look at that and see if it follows our law and what we can do from that point forward. But it's an issue we're continuing to discuss and struggle with a little bit.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that and the committee's work regarding all those items. Looks like we're ready for new business. Is there any new business?
I'd like to say one thing, James, about that. You had, I think in your information that you had, you'd looked at an associate architect or architectural associate. Let me say that right. And I tend to agree with you that that's not written correctly. It's put under a heading that is referring to, and I'm sorry to say out of state, but non-Tennessee, and all of those A through G or F or whatever it was, all are referring to that. But then this particular reference to what I'm going to say an architectural intern can call themselves is stuck under that category, and it really doesn't fit. So, Glenn, I don't know if we need to look at some way to correct that, or. But the intent when that was voted on was what that one line says.
Yeah, we kicked that around. I know what you're talking about. It's let me see the reference here. Yeah, modeled after Rule 120-01-031F. You're talking about the iteration there, the alphabetical reiteration. And obviously, I don't think that this issue is unique to engineers. I mean, architects certainly share that and deal with that as well. And what I said, I'm not Ms. Cleo. I don't have a ball in front of me that I can look into or gaze into. But I will say that I think that you're going to see already seeing in engineers a movement towards industry-wide capturing and sort of setting aside professional engineer. And I suspect architects will probably do some of that as well. And then, and not trying to corner the word engineer itself, because the issue is public perception. And so if the public themselves, by weight of the industry, knows the difference between professional engineer or architect versus architect, you can people can throw that word around. There's folks that are really good at drawings that would call themselves an architect, but they're not an occupationally licensed professional. And that's why I think that combination of words, I think, is going to end up being carved out and set aside in the public conscience, and the weight of the industry will prevail. But what we're trying to do, we discussed that in the engineering committee, is on a case-by-case basis, because our rules and statute are sufficient enough that if someone is holding themselves out as such, then we can still penalize that person. But instead of trying to litigate broadly, and then, that they say a one size fits all, fits none, we get some broad, general sort of application that's actually behind the industry. Now we're working against the grain when, the industry's gonna drive that, and then we'll follow suit. And that's gonna require a statute and rule change anyway. And so we don't wanna be first, we wanna be right. And so that's what we're waiting on, is the industry to do that. But there's some push in that direction already.
Yeah, my point was that I didn't think item F
Yeah.
should fit under that heading of that listing. Everything else refers to out-of-state, except for that one. And, I'm not saying let's get into changing rules right now or anything like that, but I'm saying when we do make a change, pulling that out as its own item rather than being part of that list, which the list leads to confusion. It almost lets you think that an architectural associate can only be if the person that's out of state is using that term.
Yeah. And it's not limited to out-of-state, use, but, Brian, I don't believe so. I don't have it in front of me, but.
Yeah, the way it's worded, the way it's subtitled in there,
It
it
does
applies
sound-
only to
yeah.
people that are from out of state.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
so that probably needs to be pulled out.
Yeah. And, I mean, we got a rulemaking hearing coming up soon, but, I don't, how that'll affect that whole package is, obviously I don't want to put that at risk, that whole package at risk after all the
Yeah,
work
no,
we've
I
done
agree.
at this point. But, that might be a good discussion for us to have.
Future,
Yeah,
yeah.
man, but that's soon. I think we're going to have that rulemaking hearing very soon. Yep. Any other, all right, so new business, any new business?
Naive question here. The reference manual that we have on the iPad, we haven't been provided that. I'm assuming I can download that?
You can, yeah, it's on the website, but in
Even
two
I can
places,
download
yeah, yeah. But, yeah, that was, any of those documents you see there that has engineer in front of it, those are committee. I try to find a way so you can find your, because, if we have several committee meetings with, and some of those, especially application review, you could have, a treasure trove of documentation. So what I've done is the full board meeting will be enumerated, so you can find that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right at the top. And then anything that's committee related will have, dare I say, that appellation attached to it. It'll say engineer or architect, and right there as a precursor, so you can find your documents. So those are documents that the engineers went over, but not, for your own edification, you can, I'll send that to you. How about that? Yeah. Yeah, but it's on there. You can find it at our website, yeah. All right, hearing no new business, then well, it looks like we're ready for public comments. Alex, while you're minding our chat there, has anyone signed in? I'll go ahead and look at the, okay. All right, we don't have anyone that signed in. We don't have anyone in the audience, and Chris isn't making eye contact, so I don't think he wants to make comments. So I think we're good. I think we're safe on the public comments. In that regard, Chair, if we're ready, I believe we're trying to find my own agenda. I think that was all that was remaining on the agenda. If it be your will and pleasure, you may adjourn the meeting.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Yep.
We are adjourned.
All right, thank you.